Hi, I'm Ginny Robertson, the founder of On Purpose Woman magazine and the founder of the On Purpose Woman global community. I'm here today with Andrea Hylen, who is one of our really consistent writers for On Purpose Woman magazine. She's written a number of different series of articles, and we're here to talk today. Andrea is our writer in the spotlight. We're going to talk about the first in her new series of articles. The series is called Conscious Self-Evolution. And the first article, which is the March-April issue, is Are You an Evolutionary Woman? So, Andrea, I'm excited that you're here with us. I love this topic. I love your writing. And I had this idea to start putting that writing, all of our writers out there more and spotlight all of you on a video so that people just don't have to read what you've written. They can see you talk about it. So, yeah, can you tell our viewers a little bit about you?
Yes, and I love it that you're doing this because having listened to some of the other, let me just say this out front and then I'll tell you about myself, but I listened to a couple of these mag chats that you've been doing, and it was so interesting to hear kind of like the backstory of and the different ways that the articles came together. So for the listeners, for the audience, I'll just say a couple of things to know about me. I am a life scientist, and an example of that is I've lived a house-free lifestyle for 9 years with a mailbox in Los Angeles, and I embody the possibilities of a sharing economy. So that is like something really deep, in my heart and all. And then the other thing I want to share is that I am devoted to healing intergenerational trauma, grief, and loss. And I do that with my work with ancestors. I'm an ancestral lineage healing practitioner. And I do that by providing opportunities for creative expression. And I do that by offering an incubator for women once a year for 5 months, where they come and work on creative projects like books, blogs, developing online programs, building entrepreneurial businesses, exploring who they are, and being their own life scientists. So yeah, we'll just start with that, Ginny.
Wow, and you are definitely a Renaissance woman, and doing all of these things. So I'm going to ask you the million-dollar question here that would take weeks to really delve into, but you've got a couple of minutes. What do you mean by conscious self-evolution?
Okay, I'm going to circle back to something that you started this off with, that I have written series of articles, a number of series of articles for the magazine. And conscious self-evolution to me is that you are a life scientist. You are looking at how are you living your life? You're asking questions. You are exploring what that is. You're not just accepting life the way it is, but you're actually looking at what messages is life bringing me. And I mentioned the series because I was looking back at the last couple of series I did. One of them was 8 valuable tips for building an innovative business and life. And I started with be willing to go on the ride. And that series came because I was sitting on the metro in DC, and I was asking the question just internally, why am I back in DC? It wasn't that because it was good or it was bad to be back in DC, but I'd been living on the West Coast. And it was, why am I living back in DC? And then the subway doors opened and I saw the words on a billboard, discover your true potential. That is a conscious self-evolution moment, okay, where you ask the question and then the universe gives you an answer.
And that's where the conscious word comes in, because we have to be paying attention.
Yes, paying attention. And I'll just say that after living in DC for a year, I saw 2 other, something on a bus and something on a flyer. It said, potential embraced. And I was like, okay, I guess my time is coming to a close here. And then potential found. is what I saw as the bus went by. I was like, so that's paying attention and not just assuming, oh, I'm back in DC, so I'm just going to live here forever. It's noticing those signs and then choosing within what's the next step.
I love that so much because it also puts us in the driver's seat. It puts us in kind of in charge as much as we can be,
Mhm.
of our decisions, the next step that we take, rather than just, showing up and going, well, I don't know what's going to happen, but, I guess I'll just go with the flow, because going with the flow has its place.
Mhm.
But if we have questions, if we have deep questions we want answered, we can't just ask the question and then not stop paying attention, because the answers will come,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
absolutely. I would even say though that it's not just that we're in charge, it's that we're co-creating with the universe.
Yes. Yes.
You're in co-creation. And so, oh gosh, years ago, I found out some news about my son, that he was going to be born with a congenital heart defect. And I remember at first being very frustrated, being really angry with the universe. Haven't I had enough things happen? And why is this happening? And, all about me, 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 me. And something shifted for me. And I feel like that's probably when all of life shifted for me, that I am co-creating with the universe. And so it's like, this is the circumstance that has been presented. There is no change. I cannot control this thing. But what I can do is pay attention. I can, co-create and notice the signs, the steps. And we have free will, just because I saw Discover Your True Potential didn't mean I needed to stay in DC or I needed to do any of it. Like, we do have free will. And there's this sweet spot of when you notice what's happening around you, instead of trying to force some other door open, but to see, okay, let's get curious here.
Mm.
Let's be with this, be in it, and at the same time observing, witnessing what's going on.
That's so beautifully said. It can, I guess, and coming from that place can also keep us from feeling as victimized as we might, because
Yeah.
it's hard to take any kind of action when we're in that victim kind of space. So you were feeling victimized, obviously. Why me? Why is this happening to me?
Yeah.
And yet there were other things you needed to be doing, right? And other things you needed to be experiencing. So that's just such a beautiful example. And you and I met because of Evolutionary Women, I do believe. So say a
Good.
little bit about that, because your article is called "Are You an Evolutionary Woman?" So say a little bit about what that means, the Evolutionary Woman Project, and all of that.
So I wrote in the article that my husband had died, and on the weekend of his memorial service, a flyer came in the mail, or a letter or something, from a friend of mine who lived in California, and it was announcing the first Evolutionary Women retreat. And there was something just receiving that day where I want to be an evolutionary woman. And then I put it away because I had life going on. I had this memorial service and had some other things. But I really went to the retreat because I wanted them to make me into an evolutionary woman. I don't know why. We all read things, or we just go, I want that, or I want to be that. And so I went there, and it really was a gathering of women with, and Barbara Marx Hubbard happened to be a main speaker for that. And because a lot of this comes out of her community, conscious self-evolution, but it was about women gathering in small circles and asking questions without trying to think the answer. It was more like, let that answer, put the question out there and then see what arises. And I cannot even tell you what question Lucky Sweeney asked at the retreat, but what it was I remember thinking, I don't have an answer to that question. And then when it was my turn to speak in a group of 3, so I was the speaker, someone else was listening, and then they had the third person witness the what you were saying. It just started pouring out of me
Mm.
that I had always been an evolutionary woman, that when there were things going on in different parts of my life, times of my life, and I questioned and I said, something can be different here. What is that? This thing isn't working. This challenge is not the way we're going to live our lives. What is the answer? That those were evolutionary questions. Those were just the fact of questioning life instead of accepting. Okay, it's funny because on the one hand, I'm saying accept being with what's being presented
Right.
as a journey, but then there's a point where you go, this doesn't feel good, or I'm uncomfortable here, or this feels harmful, or this feels abusive. That's when you say, how can this evolve into something different? So then I loved that first retreat so much in Santa Barbara that I wanted it to come to Baltimore. And so I started organizing, gathering people who could put on the retreat, and then have Lucky come from California. And I met someone, Judy Goldberg, actually, who said, well, if you want to get the word out to women in the Baltimore, Washington area, you have to go to On Purpose Woman. At that point, it was networking meetings is what they were called. And so I did. So I came, and that's how we met. I joined right away. And, the evolution, the conscious self-evolution was for me to get to that meeting, for me to develop myself by going to the meetings. And here I am. I've been going since 2007, and 2023. Wait, what's the math here?
16 years.
Yeah, 16 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a quite different woman walked into that first meeting.
Yeah.
She was a
I was,
fine woman. She was she was seeking. She was really seeking. And I
yeah.
just remember, I remember us connecting, and then I remember stuff after that happened, but it's like, I can't remember her very much.
Well, and I had a voice in a homeschooling community. I even stood
Right.
on stage and talked to 250 Girl Scouts and their parents and everything else. But there was something different about coming to a all women meeting, and that I was talking about myself.
Yeah.
You know what? It's funny because I never really thought about that until this moment. We've talked about this so many different times, but it was, yeah, that's what was different. I was talking about myself. I wasn't talking about what the events of the day would be, or I wasn't highlighting someone else on stage, which are all important things to be able to speak and do. Yeah, thank you. I just had it's funny because, all right, my next article is called Flashes of Freedom. And I feel like that I just had a flash of freedom where I just recognized that it was about speaking about myself. Yeah.
And just as a little aside here, that's probably one of the hardest things women have to face is to make it. And that's why I started the organization, because I saw women just at a party at my house having difficulty talking about themselves and, acknowledging their gifts and just being front and center. And that pained me. And I wasn't always that woman either. So it was like I had information about that. What did it take for me to be courageous enough to step out and think that I had something to offer? And wow, because we need so much of that. We need women to be doing that like all the time, right?
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
whatever level whatever level they are, just stepping out and having the courage to be seen and heard,
And I'm sure that any woman listening to this has had some version of being told she's too much, or who do you think you are? Or, so there's been these messages of like, stuff it, or don't take up room on the stage and everything. So it takes practice. And that's why I've continued to come to the meetings. I'll just highlight that when you're a member of this organization, you get to speak 3 times a month in a 5-minute featured speaker, and it's a great place to practice
Mhm.
speaking about things that are important to you, speaking about something that's on your mind. And many women use it to talk about something that they're working on or developing, or a service. But that's not why I didn't really come for the, other than, well, of course, I was talking about evolutionary women retreats, but then for years, I really didn't have something that I was selling to the
Right,
group.
right.
It was a space to stand up and speak about something that mattered to me.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Wait, something really stood out for me in your article. You talked about you did a very successful evolutionary women retreat here in Baltimore, which I attended.
Yes, you did.
And then a book, some of us were involved in a book that came out of that. We had a chapter in the book. But you wrote something in your article of observations that you made at both of these. And you said there were two common themes
Mhm.
of two things that women seem to have dealt with, or things that something that had happened in their lives. And I'd like for you to just say a few words about what those two things are.
Well, the first thing was that I noticed that women spoke of some kind of breakdown in their life. And really, I could even say in this moment that it was some kind of loss or ending
Mhm.
or something that broke down. And it was through that breakdown, instead of giving up, they actually took steps, whatever that was, internally, externally, and it became a breakthrough.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the breakthrough then led to,
Creating something,
mhm.
and many times it was women joining together with someone else, whether it was a collaboration or learning from someone, or to help what that breakthrough was.
Yeah. So that, I think that brings us back to the conscious self-evolution, and that conscious word, that we can be experiencing a breakdown and be so immersed in the breakdown that we don't notice that there are other possibilities. And something, we have to be in the breakdown phase for as long as we need to be in that phase and
Absolutely.
feel it all and just deal with it. But there comes a point when we start to see the possibilities. I know for me, I was going through a divorce, and I was not a self-reflective person for the most part.
Mhm.
But I started to have it. I got into therapy, and I started to have these doors open, and then possibilities came through, and I started to realize there were things about me, ways that I didn't want to continue to be, and which started to change my external life as well. And then that led to something else and something else and something else. So that whole breakthrough I think breakdowns are necessary to have breakthroughs. I don't think they come really big
Exactly.
breakthroughs don't come without something before that. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. And when you can, and self-reflection is a part of our evolution. It's
Mhm.
the ability to see what's going on there. And with my divorce, or with the breakdown of a marriage, I ended up going to Al-Anon. And then Al-Anon led me to do some family constellation work and see a pattern of alcoholism and begin to understand what that was. And that led me to develop my intuition. And that and it's like I have become a fuller, richer person by not just staying in a broken down marriage, or not getting divorced and then being bitter.
Mhm.
It was in that breakdown, what can you open yourself to? What can you explore about yourself? What can you explore about life?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I think that's a great place to end
I
this,
think
unless you
so
have a
too.
final word that you want to put out to everyone.
I would say keep coming back and reading the magazine, because what I'm going to be using is 52 Codes for Conscious Self Evolution by Barbara Marx Hubbard. And there are 52 codes. I'm not going to do 52 articles, but I am going to write 9 more articles and kind of go through the evolution of that. And I'll also say that Beth Shakina Terrence and I just started a Facebook group that's open to people joining, women and men. and we've called it Energetic Explorations for Evolution. We're doing a monthly Facebook Live around a theme in the group. Our first theme was a new beginning. And we're going to actually tomorrow do a embodying beauty, joy, and compassion. That's going to be our next theme. And in that group, we were very consciously talking about breakdowns and breakthroughs and how can we evolve on the planet right now, individually and collectively. Yeah. So I'll leave people with that and check it out on Facebook.
Well, if you're watching this like live right now, that information is not in the text, but I'm going to add it. So if you're watching this later, that link to the Facebook group will be in the text, as will Andrea's website and also the link to the On Purpose Woman magazine. So please sure you go over and check that out. You can see the March-April issue right there on the page, or go back and look at our archives for the last 4 years of amazing articles by women like Andrea. And the next issue will be coming out on May 1st. So thanks for watching, everyone. Thank you, Andrea, for being here with me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Ginny.